There were pornographic images drawn in my likeness being raped by video game characters. I had long discussions about whether to share any of this because of the risks involved.
Get the fuck out. The movie. A documentary about women in gaming directed by Shannon Sun Higginson. Its creation was spurred on by this guy being a creeper towards a female participant in a fighting game event. After a couple of viewings, it seems to me that they were trying to lay out this path where games culture leads to sexual harassment in real life. But what they really made is a string of scatterbrained vlogs and, at worst, cynical self-promotion. Anita Sarkeesian's segments in particular were unsettling and gave the impression that she said these exact words many, many times before. At the end of her recital, she even powers down like a robot. And trust me, when it comes to robots, it takes one to know one. Lee Alexander's little promo spot was a lot more natural, but I still didn't find it of any value in terms of gleaning new information. It very much gives off a PR vibe.
I also focus especially on diversity on games from unheard voices, so I'm not participating in games as product culture.
It's almost more of a sales pitch, but it still fits nicely the tone the director seems to be going for, to the point that it feels to me like the director was going out to get sound samples that they wanted for their story they were making, rather than to go in and look at what is there. Because what Lee said is bollocks. How much more of a participant in games as product culture can you be beyond consulting developers on how to better serve demand and shape their game to get reviewers to say what you want? When I hear the phrase, games as product culture, that's exactly what I imagine. Oh, but it's niche and cultural, so it doesn't count. You're still just trying to shape it to get people to buy shit, even if they're a different audience to what you'd call the mainstream. But of course, for the purpose of this documentary, she is just a journalist and critic. It would give a bit of a different image if they painted her as someone trying to exploit niche markets, wouldn't it? Here it sounds like she's doing charity work. The documentary did of course need to include another rehash of Gamers Are Dead, this time recited by Jennifer Hepler.
We should be working toward a time where gamer as a label doesn't exist anymore. You know, you don't identify yourself as, I'm a moviegoer. Because everybody sees movies, because it's just so pervasive in the culture.
If you've seen videos of mine covering this idea, you might expect me to say, well, that's exactly why the label tightens. The label is separate from just being one who plays games. And it's because everyone plays games that it is not enough to just play games to be suitably labeled gamer. And that I would suggest that the label has tightened quite naturally to suit that. But you know what? She's convinced me. Just like how we got rid of the label writer. Everyone writes now is just a part of culture. Why would you identify yourself or others as being a writer? Just use it like moviegoer. When a bunch of people are writing, just say, oh, there are some writers. Why would anyone say, I am a writer or she's a writer? That would be like saying, I'm a gamer or she's a gamer. Oh.
And they want to keep the name gamer to themselves as, this is a club that I belong to.
It's very much the case that they haven't sought out just women in gaming. They've sought out people with a particular view and particular prejudices to speak about women in gaming. Because I guess you could make the argument, look, they're just letting women in gaming speak and have an audience. But it isn't actually just women in gaming speaking about their experiences or something along those lines. Check out this guy.
Who's buying our games? Straight white men in their 20s. So we're gonna make a game targeted to straight white men in their 20s. Amazingly, that means more straight white men in their 20s are gonna buy your game. And so who's buying the next game? Straight white men in their 20s.
It's like they've gone for, let's find people who say that men are a problem. And it's turned the documentary into an absolute clusterfuck. The documentary has taken all of these sources and tried to split them into stages, the different aspects of the problem they see. Between each section of the documentary, there is a brief cartoon showing a woman losing health to each of these issues. It's clear that each stage is meant to be illustrated as adding up, but I found that some of them clashed. So that clip you just saw was from the segment on marketing. They have that guy saying that, they have another woman saying that because all the big developers are male and the playtesters are male, you end up with games that men like. What is that meant to be causing? It's meant to cause women not to play games, right? Surely. But at the same time, there's the point that half the people who play games are women, and that the bigger problem is the creation side. Women aren't making games. Overall, the impression this film gave me is that no one agrees on what the problem is. No one agrees on how to solve it. No one agrees on what caused it. Even given the whole thing about these games appeal to men, they're made by men, it perpetuates men playing these games. If those are male dominated and we have the same proportion of men and women playing games now, why aren't the games that obviously appeal to and perpetuate women playing those games a problem? I think throughout this, the director is trying to draw lines between things that just are not there. And so while the layout and the transitions between sections make it seem like a road to a conclusion, it feels more like randomly clicking around feminist YouTube channels. It's honestly like someone tried to make propaganda and fucked up. One of the very strangest things that struck me was one of the academic sources saying this.
If you tell men, Asians do better than white men at math, Asian men will perform better than white men at math. In other words, people's behavior conforms to the ideas that we have about the world. And one very powerful idea that we have about the world is that gamers are men.
So are half the people who play games not women then? Or is she talking about the label gamer? Because people have been twisting this around and throwing it around for the whole documentary, and I have no fucking idea what's being talked about. And if people think gamer means man, it's because people like this are constantly saying that. No one else says that. I have never ever met someone who calls themselves a gamer and says gamers are men, or even implies it. What I have seen, however, is press saying that is the case for years, and now that I look, academics have been saying that for years. Maybe the idea is to connect this all up and say advertising makes people think that gamers are men, but the answer to that isn't to manipulate the entire world. It's for people to stop being idiots and letting that dictate what they do. There's a clip of that tubby guy I showed you earlier saying the problem isn't that there are sexy women, it's that that's all there is, and essentially advocating that there's a huge problem with depoliticization of games and that we need to view them as messages that need to be ethically controlled and limited. The example this guy gave of that being a problem was someone from Blizzard blowing off Nathan Grayson after he asked about sexualized characters in Heroes of the Storm. The Skype call with Rhianna Pratchett was fine, but not really enlightening. It's just your typical approach to people caring about stories rather than games. Let's talk about the emotional impact this documentary has had on me, as that's the aim, to have an emotional impact on people, to change their view of things, and it has changed my view of things. I have far less empathy than I did before.
It's the drip, drip, drip of everyday venom.
Pretty much everything I'm seeing that is meant to be a problem or harmful to women is nothing. Just, you're fat, you're ugly, I'm gonna rape you, I'm gonna kill you, talking about genitals, whatever. There's this thought that, no, you don't have to tolerate this is unacceptable. But for some people, they don't tolerate it. Some people are actually into that a bit. And I don't just mean sending abuse, I mean they are happy to receive abuse because it's just hyper-aggressive and it's a rush. It's like sources have been carefully collected from the group of people who believe in changing things to suit them rather than carving their own niche. People who, ironically, in the name of diversity, cannot tolerate difference.
I'm more primarily a single player gamer, but sometimes it takes an outsider to kind of come into a culture and say, wait a minute, this is fucked up.
It's very clear that this documentary is designed to make a point. It's not a general look at things, they have been very selective, but I have no idea what the point they're trying to make is. It feels far more like an attempt to pander than to cut into what they see as an issue. And of course they end it with game dropping.
Gamergate.
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 Singling out Gamergate is almost, it's a mistake because it doesn't acknowledge the fact that the problem exists on a much larger scale.
I actually agree. The problem is far bigger than anything mentioned. Regardless of whether I agree or disagree with what this is trying to do, what is the problem? Rude messages online? Games that appeal to men? Too many games that appeal to men? Is it people vaguely threatening stuff? Because that isn't credible, and to clamp down on that, you'd have to clamp down on a hell of a lot more. Is it women being hesitant to label themselves as gamers? Is it the gamer label existing at all? Is it that women are being discouraged from playing games? Is it that an equal number of women play games to men, but they're not making them? Whatever it is, I think you need to look at the common factor, and I think the common factor is the way the people affected by these problems look at the world. You can say, okay, this is how people look at the world. We need to change and clamp down on the whole world to change it so that when these people look at it, they become game developers. Or you can stop raising shit kids instead of blaming video games for your problems. And I mean just everyone in general. Stop this bullshit. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.